job interview is one of the most anxiety-provoking situations most people can find themselves in, even when they go to plan. But what happens when you have your worst interview ever? Our guests share their worst interviews ever in the hope that you will take something from their mistakes to have a more successful interview outcome. Some of the stories are horrific and some are just downright embarrassing. Let's join our host, Kevin O'Reilly, the interview skills coach with over 25 years' experience in the fields of coaching and recruitment. Let's welcome our guests to the show.
Today's guest is someone who has helped entire regions rethink what growth really looks like. Declan Barry is the Managing Director of Export Explorer, a powerhouse firm that blends trade, investment, and community-focused innovation to help places thrive. With 2 decades of experience in sales and leadership and economic development, Declan's worked with governments, entrepreneurs, and companies across the UK, Ireland, Switzerland, and the US, all with one goal: creating real, lasting value for people and communities. Whether he's chairing an enterprise agency, supporting a charity that uses boxing to break down barriers, or helping his wife launch an art therapy venture, Declan's the kind of leader who brings a grounded, human-first approach to everything he does. And yes, once upon a time, he landed in the financial services by accident, and it was a disaster, which of course makes him the perfect guest for my worst interview ever. Declan, it is great to have you on board here today.
Thanks for the invite, Kevin.
You're very, very welcome here today. Declan, where do we find you today?
I'm in the home office today. We're here in the People's Republic of West Belfast, getting ready for over 30s night with the fella. And it's over 30s plus VAT, unfortunately, but I'm not sure they're going to kick me out quite yet. But it's a nice part of the world. It's a lovely day, thankfully. But I'm at home today. There was no need to go into the office.
Oh, that's nice. That's nice. I was at one of the events last week, Happy Fest.
Oh, very good.
It was very good. It was first time I've been, and I'll be back. It was very enjoyable.
Yeah, it's really, it's one of those things, and it's one of those things that Northern Ireland does pretty well and Belfast does pretty well. But it's the largest community festival in Europe, and there are hundreds of events happening over a number of weeks, and it's a really nice thing for the community. So it's important that when we're here, we spend so much time complaining when people don't do things and there aren't interesting things to do and be a part of. Whenever there are, we really do have to try and make the effort and the time to go and participate. So it's a nice time of year in this part of the world.
Absolutely. Barry, tell our listeners a little bit about you, okay? And not too much.
No, well, my name's Declan Barry. As you say, I work in the economic development industry, which a lot of people don't really understand what that is. But really, whenever you see, a company comes here and creates 100 jobs or does business in another country for the first time, that's really encompassing the industry from start to finish. And there's all sorts of technical things in the middle, but really that's what it's about. It's about creating jobs. It's about increasing value. And it's allowing for community-based organizations. And by that, I mean the small businesses that peppered across our communities and provide wealth and income and opportunity for citizens, helping them to grow. And because we're a small country, we can only grow so much. So we have to go international if we're going to grow further. So most of my work is helping small community-born businesses to move into new jurisdictions and create new opportunities.
And I know we had read out earlier that you've worked across many different boundaries, US and different places. Where's the best place you've worked?
Oh, well, I have a lot of fun traveling, and it's hard to say because everywhere's different. So everyone, there are certain places that I remember for completely different reasons. The only place in the world I've had to have a guard leaving a bar in the evening was in Alaska. Why? Polar bears. Polar bears are a genuine threat when you're going back to your hotel at 11 o'clock at night in Alaska. Who'd have thunk it? But we do a lot of work. Most of the work we do is between Pennsylvania and the UK. We also do work for businesses from Virginia coming to the UK. We do some work in Delaware. We do some work in Switzerland, helping UK and Irish businesses do business in Switzerland. But we have a lot of fun in places like Pittsburgh. I spent St. Patrick's Day there last year. I'm just about recovering now. And there are lots of places. I've been really lucky in this line of work to travel and to see the world, which is a big eye opener for lots of things, and a lot of things that we'll talk about today. But seeing different cultures, different types of people, different traits and characteristics is fantastic. So there are an awful lot of places that are very dear to my heart but for lots of different and unusual regions.
Yeah. Yeah, and I suppose that's like everything. That's just life, isn't it?
It
You'll
is.
have something you like from one place and something you like from another, and it's a reason why we continue to go back to these places.
It is. It is, and it's why I live in Andytown.
The center of the universe, as
The center. That's it.
yeah,
That's
as I
it.
understand it to be. Yep. But give us a little sneak peek and preview into your worst interview ever. Now, don't be giving us too much. Don't be
I,
spoiling us.
all I'll say is that the organization of something takes a lot, and it's the appreciation of the employer and the process and what's involved. And I could have drop kicked him over a wall afterwards. And that's all I'll say at this point.
Well, you've got me intrigued. I'm looking forward to hearing exactly what this is about. I purposely don't ask what it is beforehand because I like to be amazed, and I usually am, and I usually am. But
Good.
before we get there, Declan, we jested about you falling into this line of work.
Yeah.
How do you fall into a line of work?
Well, you fall into a line of work because you usually make a bad decision somewhere along the line, and then you have to dig yourself out of it, like everyone does in their career. I came out of, I was in the first cohort of marketing graduates from Ulster University. It was the first year they'd run the degree. I wasn't even supposed to be in it. I tripped and fell backwards out of my A levels. I was expecting to emigrate to another country. I didn't think I was going to university. And then a lady called Sharon McCabe rang me from Ulster University and said, "Hey, your grades sucked, but we're starting a new degree and we're undersubscribed. Will you come in for an interview?" And it was one of the first proper interviews I'd ever done. And I don't know, I knew nothing about marketing, so I can only assume that she must have thought it was good crack or something. So she gave me a place on the degree and we did it. But when I graduated, I realized that Northern Ireland at that time did not have a marketing industry, really. We didn't, the way we know it today wasn't the way it was then. I have the autonomous thing of saying I was a chartered marketer pre-Facebook. So it's changed a bit since then. It's not
Just a little,
just a little bit
just a
since
little.
then. So what we really tried to do was go into it from there, and I ended up in sales jobs. I worked in the insurance industry, did pretty well in the insurance industry, starting with personal lines insurance, car insurance, which thousands of people in this country do. Was quite good at that. Got into branch management, then got into regional management, and then I decided to go and work with one of our biggest retailers here, running financial services for their organization, i.e., you buy a television, you take out insurance in it.
Mm-hmm.
There is all the same law goes behind that as if you were doing it from a proper insurance company. But when I realized I wasn't actually doing that, and I was sitting on a Sunday morning putting out frozen chickens because 15 different people had, called in sick, and the culture was terrible and the atmosphere was terrible, I thought this is probably a bad idea. I shouldn't be doing this. And I left. I was the best paid chicken stacker in the country at that point. I was getting a fantastic salary to put out chickens. And I couldn't do that. And I quit and I took a summer off and I ran out of money, as you do whenever you're kind of 25 and stupid. So we did that. And then I took a job for a consulting firm doing sales work again, because that's what I could do. I was a salesperson.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in this indescript office, which I'd never heard of in Bedford Street. And then I ended up spending 8 years behind the desk at Invest Northern Ireland doing international economic development. And I didn't even know that the industry had existed before walking in the room to do the interview. So
Okay.
you find yourself doing this. And then when I got into the interview, I got into the job. I fell in love with the job. I fell in love with the industry. And I realized that it opened all sorts of doors and opportunities that, frankly, um, I did not have even 12 months earlier selling corporate insurance out of Portakabin in South Belfast. The world which was open to you at that point was completely different. So I ended up tripping and falling backwards into the industry by accident. But it was ended up being fabulous. So just as I was unlucky to trip into the bad job, I then just as easily accidentally got into a decent one again. So I suppose
Mhm.
maybe life has a plan and things work out.
Listen, it sounds like a bit of a pattern here, though, Declan. Might need
Of
to get your
yeah,
balance checked.
feeling upwards
Feel
is the
well. Listen, I'm a great believer in feeling forward. Most genuinely a great believer in feeling forward, and it sounds exactly like you have done. But I'm
yeah.
sure that with all of those different types of industries, and actually, do you know what? Before we get there, I want to just come back to something you said about the the you were the most expensive paid chicken decker. That happens in so many jobs and so many industries.
Incredible.
And I'm sure you've seen it yourself, even in your line of work now.
Oh, you know, it is. You see some really fabulous people. And my wife used to work in the health service, and she had some amazing, amazing people whose hands are tied by the system. Their
Mm.
hands are tied by processes. Their hands are tied by poor leadership. And you get people who are well compensated, could deliver incredible value. But the situation, the tone, the setup, the equipment, the whatever it is, effectively binds them to being unable to do it. So we have a real issue across the board here in terms of them without dragging it completely into the line of leadership and all that sort of stuff.
Hmm.
There is a real issue around people going into a situation and through a recruitment process and getting out the other end and finding out that the job they work into isn't the job that they thought they were applying to at all. And that mismatch, it happens a lot
It
across the
does.
board, across sectors.
It does. It does. And I've actually seen some of the research that talks around the job description and how that is actually misleading so many people into roles that don't actually even exist anymore.
No.
And it's because, and I don't tar every HR department with this brush, but because some people within departments are under so much pressure that they will grab the first handy thing that they have sitting there that they've used 5 years ago, and then they bring it back out again and put it back out. Because if I hired you for a sales job, then surely all sales jobs are the same. So I'll just bring out the same job
Yep.
description. But you know yourself, like you've said about the marketing, with time, things change,
Absolutely.
things move on. I am seeing so many job descriptions that have been used time and time and time again. And there's lots of little things when you look at it, when even when organizations say there's no good people out there anymore, there's nothing, there's nobody there. We're fishing, but we can't catch any. I will look at their job descriptions. I will look at what criteria they're using. I will look at what they're even telling the candidates about their business and what it is they're trying to attract. I'm not surprised. Is my thing. I am not surprised that they cannot find the people. Some of the job descriptions are asking for three individual job roles in one with one salary.
And not only that, you have to have 15 years experience doing it, but it's an entry level post.
Yeah.
And you know, and you go, guys, come on, put the bottle down. Like this is ridiculous. And
Yeah.
you're not going to get the person that you want. The job description's too broad. And not only that, anyone who actually is experienced in the industry, the person that you want to hire will read that and go, nah,
Yeah, I don't want to go to them.
I'm not doing that. I mean, we had very recently my niece was looking for a job. She recently graduated and she was looking for a job. She was looking at marketing jobs. So she was sending me links to companies that were advertising these jobs on LinkedIn, and I'm going, nope, nope, nope. Just because I know something about them, and I go, no, just please, will you give me one job I can apply for? Um, but a lot of the jobs that they were there, they were direct marketing jobs. They were sales
Mm,
jobs. They were door
yeah,
to
yeah.
door sales jobs, but they were writing job descriptions of marketing and using the language of marketing. And I'm reading it and I'm going, no, this is door-to-door sales. This is, forget about it. You're not doing that. It's rubbish. You
Mm-hmm.
move on, do something else. So, not everyone is lucky enough to have people around them who can look at it and go,
Yeah.
nope, 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 do that one. Don't skip that one. So there are so many people who go to these jobs under false pretenses.
Yeah.
There are so many people do it, and the people who do recognize it look at it and go, oh, no, I'm not. I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole. And
Yeah.
that becomes more and more of an issue, and it's lazy on both sides.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Not
I had
ideal.
a guy on here, another business owner on here, who runs a currying facility, and he had said that whenever people were coming in to do one of the roles, their expectation was that they were coming in to sit with the elderly person, have a chat with them, move them around, get them the newspaper, give them their dinner, and go home. When in actual fact it was they were very hands-on. They were needing to change them, wash them, bathe them, and that wasn't being explained to people in the job description or at the interview. So what was happening was they were getting through the interview okay. By the time they get in and they realized what the actual job was, they left. So they had a huge high turnover within the probationary period for either
Yeah.
failure or not, or just leaving. What a waste of everybody's time and money.
It is, but I'm a big fan of 3-day job roles. You bring
Mm,
someone in, you pay them for 3 days, you bring them in for 3 days, you see whether they know what they're doing, they get to see the job, you get to see them, they get to meet the staff. You get to test the no unsavory people policy
mm,
of the place. Everyone can switch it on for an hour in an interview.
absolutely.
Pay them 150 quid to come in for 3 days, and you'll see you'll see what's what. And if it works out, great. You can be very, very highly confident. If it doesn't work out, you can say goodbye to them at the end of day one. No one's any the wiser. But it's that sort of piece of how do we experientially, especially for those kind of jobs,
Mm,
where people are interacting with people, where people are sitting with clients. And we have this issue with I have a service-based business. You mentioned the Antrim Enterprise Agency organization. Like, we're hiring people who have to sit in front of people and deliver value. And everyone can talk a great game in those
hmm.
spaces, but can you actually do it? The only way to do it is to see. So
Absolutely.
I kind of, and I don't know in practice how it would work, and legally you're probably not even allowed to do it. But I always think that if we could find a way of experientially giving people a sample, that we would end up with a much more accurate picture of the person who's coming into the organization than what they can tell us in 45 minutes of well-rehearsed conversation. But
Yeah.
it's a separate thing, but it is a real challenge. But especially in those types of roles, it's difficult. They're hard, and they're not compensated well enough. And it wouldn't be for me, but I have a lot of admiration for people who do that.
Yeah. This whole 3 day idea you have is fantastic because it would work a real treat. As you quite rightly said, 1 hour, anybody can switch it on for 1 hour. Give them 3 days, check them out. But what are you looking for, Declan, when when you're doing that 3 days? Is it you're looking for the hard skills to ensure that what they have written on their CV is accurate? And or are you looking for attitude, behavior, personality, values? What is built into that 3 days?
I think we would have a bit of an internal joke where there's the old thing about the New Zealand rugby team and the no DHs policy. I'm trying not to swear on your podcast, but you kind of want to make sure that we had another expression for it, which was the glass of wine test, and that is, if we were traveling, and we often do in my industry, you're often sitting in a hotel lobby at 7 o'clock in the evening after having dinner, and you want to be sociable, so you spend half an hour having a glass of wine with someone or a beer before people retire and disappear or do whatever it is they want to do with their time. And you're going, well, is this someone that I could sit and have a glass of wine with and a natter about anything? It doesn't have to be
Mm-hmm.
work about anything. Can I sit across a table from you? Or even more importantly, if my client was with us, Could I trust you to sit and have a glass of wine with them and pass yourself as a passable normal human? That's the first thing that's most important in our world, because it's all about relationships and it's all about people and trust, and that factor of being able to actually sit across from someone. And that's not tangible, unfortunately. That's not something that you can really score on the interview form, because it's that gut feel that you get from someone looking in their eyes. That's why I much prefer in-person interviews than the digital interviews. I'm not a big fan of Zoom interviews unless it's someone who's in another country.
Yeah.
But it's those intangible things. I'm assuming on the technical side, if they say they can do A, B, C, and D, and they have experience and qualifications, they wouldn't be sitting in the room with me if they didn't have those. So I'm assuming they can do that and they have a level of competency. It could be rusty, maybe it's slightly exaggerated, whatever, that's fine. But we can train the hard skills. We
Yeah.
can't train the soft skills. We can't train if someone is awkward and rude and direct with people for no reason. We can't change even stupid stuff, and this is going to sound ridiculous, but if they have a tendency to bring in a smelly lunch and put it in the microwave and annoy everyone for the afternoon, whatever it is, these small things which give you a flavor of who someone is. And sometimes that's quite entertaining as well. If there's a healthy dislike, that's not a bad thing either in a workplace.
Yeah.
But it's those things where you get a look and feel for someone who they actually are, not what they've been for 45 minutes in a conversation.
Yeah.
And also in those 45 minutes, people are nervous, people are edgy, people are it's not how they would be when they're in the job. So I just like the idea of that. Plus, when you go in, then you've got them for 6 months on a probationary period or whatever, and that's too long. If you've made a decision, that 6 month period is too long, because you're not helping them. One, if you know it's the right person, I don't think it's right to keep this thing hanging over their head for 6 months or a year or whatever it is. And if they're the wrong person, you're holding them back from what they should be doing. And let them go. So this is a very long answer to a very short question, but whenever that, what are you looking for? It's the intangibles. It's the stuff that I can't ask about. I can't, and oftentimes, let's be really honest with each other, I'm not allowed to ask about, are you socially awkward? Are you rude to people? That's not something I can ask in an interview. I have to see it. So it's that stuff. The technical stuff is there. It's all attitude. It's all, is this someone who wants to be here? Is this someone who can add value and wants to add value? That's the big thing.
And you mentioned rudeness as one of those, and it comes across like that's a big no for you. Anybody who is rude, it's a definite big X. What other things could you recommend to our listeners that they don't do? So those red flags potentially. I know you said you can't really judge people within that 45 minutes properly, but there is bound to be a couple of things that someone walks in, says or does something, and you go, not a chance.
There are a couple, and I've listened to your podcasts, the few of them that I've had time to look at over the last couple of days, and I'm trying not to repeat what other people say, but actually the top three that came to my mind, I don't think other people have noticed. The first one is cliche. Cliche really annoys me. So whenever people say, you get some of the ones which are, what do you think your challenges are, or how could you improve, or what are your things? And you go, my biggest flaw is that I'm a perfectionist, but that's also my biggest thing. I've heard that 15 times in interviews, and every time it's get straight in the bin. Get straight in the bin. That's lazy. Think of something, stop it. You must have been on the internet or whatever. ChatGPT has a lot to be responsible. I don't know, but stop saying things like that. The other one, the best one I ever heard was whenever, for example, in sales occupations, a big issue is targets. And it's not necessarily you have to hit the targets or else, but it's if we're not on track, what do you do? What would you do if you weren't on track? And that's a massive issue. And it's a technical question. It's not it's not a I'm just going to work harder. It's well, we need to go back and revisit. We need to look at our plans. We need to look at our resources. We need to look at our pitch. Da, 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 da. There's a technical process behind that of review and implementation and blah, blah, blah. And at a certain level, you would expect a salesperson to say that. One person in particular responded to me saying, "Ah, sure, pressure's for tires." And I remember
Right.
just putting my pen down and going, "We're done. That it's over. I'm going to pretend to write notes, but it'll actually be a doodle." No, 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 because there was no attempt at actual a technical answer. And I find when people throw in cliche, it's lazy or it's
Mm.
just someone who hasn't taken the process. The second thing that I would say is gossip. I'm always nervous about that. And by that, I mean people who talk about their former employers.
Ah,
I think
okay.
that's
Okay.
you know, I'm assuming because you're sitting in front of me, you want to leave your job. Why
Mm.
you want to leave your job isn't really any of my business. And the circumstances that have you sitting in front of me aren't really any of my business either. I'm assuming I'm going to give good faith and say you're here because you want to work with us. Um, I don't want to know that your old boss was rude to you. I don't want to know that someone was having an affair with somebody else. I don't want to know all this stuff. And I've had those, I've had these people tell me that I couldn't work there. It was a toxic environment and blah, 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 blah. Usually when someone is raising that as the reason they're leaving, if I was to ask five people from their former employer, usually it was that person who was causing the toxicity and the problems in the first place. So again, and it's only because I've hired a bunch of them and learned afterwards that, oh crap, that was probably a mistake. The payroll usually pays for that mistake. But usually when I have somebody who is criticizing their former employers or gossiping about this, that, or the other, it usually makes me doubt the seriousness of that person.
Yeah.
And it also makes me wonder, oh God, if things don't go well here, what are they going to be saying about us? You
Well,
know?
that's exactly it, and that's how I think as well. Declan, is what they'll say to you, they'll say about you
Mm-hmm.
to other people, and you've all, yeah, and I'm sure you've heard it, and I'm sure our listeners have heard it, that you surround yourself with people you can trust, and
Mm-hmm.
those that you can't, you take out of your circle. It's as simple as that. And that is
Fantastic.
that's a massive red flag for me as a surrounding myself with people who I can trust, who won't carry gossip, who don't give it either.
And I'm okay. Listen, things happen, and like everyone's adults, things happen. There are disputes, there are arguments, there are all the rest of it.
Mm.
But it's the decision making about going into what is a formal conversation,
Yeah.
and deciding that you're going to air your dirty laundry in that conversation. I just think it's a bad choice, and I think it's a bad look. So it kind of it puts me off, and it raises my eyebrow. The final thing that I would say is, and I suppose it's more in that because a lot of people who will be looking for interviews are probably at that middle. People who are really preparing for interviews are probably at that middle management level or in that kind of part of developing their
Mm.
career. Um, I think it's the issue where the level of your answer doesn't match the level of the job in both directions. So what I mean by that is if I'm asking you, if I'm saying, Kevin, you're looking for a job which is as you know, a grade 5 or whatever in the public sector, or you're going for the kind of that entry level management job, and you're going through a competency based interview, when the responses to the question are either too simplistic that they don't look at the nuance of the situation, the job, and indicate that you actually get the pressures and forces that the person in that job actually faces, that's
Hmm.
a red flag for me that the person who's there probably isn't at that level to step up yet. And equally, when we have perhaps an external candidate or someone in the current team, which actually happens more often, who are talking like they're 3 grades above and
Yeah.
almost being like it's daft if you don't do this, if you don't do that, and they're talking as if they're 3 or 4 levels up. That also is a red flag for me because I feel that that person has ideas beyond where they are, and I'm not sure how authentic they'll be or happy they'll be in the role that we're given. So I always try to ask questions whenever I'm talking, maybe not necessarily in interviews I'm in myself because I'll make my own decision, but whenever I'm perhaps talking to a team who have been doing recruitment, I will be asking them, do you feel that their answers, if you can imagine someone who was in that job for a year and you ask them that question, do you feel that the answers that person gave were at the level of understanding that
Yeah.
that they would be? That's a
But
big thing.
that's the key, isn't it? The
Yeah.
level of understanding.
And they might not have the technical skill because they've got to learn that when they step up.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's the soft skills, it's the knowing what you don't know, as opposed to not knowing what you don't know, but carrying on regardless. And there is always an element of that too. But I just think on that's probably the most important one for me, actually, is the level of understanding in the answer. Especially for those middle management and upward roles. Because that's the ones that if you get them wrong, you're in real trouble.
Yeah. And what I tend to find with regards to the interviews and regards to what you're talking about, this level of understanding in the answers, is that some people are just caught. They just don't know how to change that. And without anybody helping them understand that, and for that matter, without them accepting that it isn't correct, they're never going to change it.
No, no. And they'll often come out of an interview process really, frankly, peed off because they'll go, I could have done that, but you didn't give it to me. You didn't give it to me in the answer. You didn't give it to me authentically. You didn't trust me. And it's a real frustration because you get some really good people who could do the job, but they don't articulate it in the conversation. It's another reason why perhaps somehow interviews are flawed. But the challenge becomes, I need to take responsibility for myself as the candidate. I need to put myself, I was told along years and years ago by a bit of a mentor from one of my first jobs, and he had said, you do the interview as if you're in the job. You already have the job, you've been doing it for 3 months, and this is like a first quarter check-in. This is how you treat it. And that for me was very useful. It was like, this is a Q1 check-in. You have to mentally be in that job already. You have to radiate the confidence that you're there already. And it would be stupid of them not to make it permanent, right?
Yeah.
It would just be that not to make it.
Now here's a question for you based on that. How does someone just starting out do that? So let's say first job for someone going in at that sort of level. How do they go in with that attitude of, well, I've been doing this for 3 months. That it's just I need to tick this box to get me over that line.
It's hard. And I'm not sure. I'm not actually sure that schools prepare young people, and I'll also say schools get a lot of flack for stuff that parents should probably be doing with kids in terms of social preparation and all that sort of stuff. I think I have a few friends who are school teachers who would be cheering at me saying that probably mothers and fathers need to take more responsibility for this part of the process than depending on lecturers and teachers. But what I would say is it's also about being appropriate with the level of the job and understanding. It's one of the things which we'll probably talk about later. It's the expectation of the panel. So the panel are also there from the point of view of, they have invited you. They need the process to be successful. They want the process to be successful. And you can be more relaxed in how you approach that situation. What I would say in terms of having that I've been here for 3 months attitude, oftentimes at that level, it's just about sitting in a chair and being at peace with yourself. Sit,
That's it.
relax, find a comfortable place for your hands to be. What do you need from me? I know nothing. I admit that you know nothing is probably the most powerful thing that you can do, is admit that you know nothing. And they'll go, okay, this is someone we can work with. And that's all they're looking for. So in terms of that 3-month thing for a graduate job or someone just starting out, I think it's just being the easy to communicate with person. that they're looking for.
Mm. I wanna just go back a little bit to what you were saying there about the schools,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't want to throw you under a bus or anything, with your friends.
Feel free.
No, it's. I have noticed that as well. I have noticed what you're saying about that schools get a lot of flack. They also are completely underfunded
Mm-hmm.
and they're understaffed, and they from the schools that I attend and deliver these interview skills coaching sessions to, they try their very best with a very, 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 very limited budget.
And again, that's a wider thing. I mean, the charity that I'm involved with, Bridges Beyond Boxing, we take young people from, um, let's say, underserved areas
Mm,
of the island of Ireland. It's an all island program, and we bring them over to North America, and they'll compete with young people over there, and they'll use it to raise money for the charity. But they'll stay with families over there. They do cultural exchange. They'll go to see landmarks, places. They'll get tours of places that they wouldn't normally get a chance to see. And these are kids who wouldn't have that opportunity otherwise unless
mm,
programs like this exist. We see this in programs that are being delivered schools around everything from interview skills, but also look at things like financial literacy.
yeah.
Look at things like social skills. Look at
Hmm.
things like all sorts of education that aren't, numbers and cross addings and spellings. We're in a situation where all of that is so underfunded and under resourced. It's delivered by the third sector. It's not actually delivered by the schools anymore. And if the
Yeah.
third sector shuts down or can't do it, it just doesn't happen at all. And that's not necessarily the way we want things to be. But in this area in particular, we are in a situation whereby we have no other choice. But the main thing on this particular thing with the interview skills and all that kind of crack, there is some of it which is just put on a shirt, tidy yourself up.
Mm.
If they ask you this, what are you going to say? If they ask you that, what are you going to say? It's about presence and it's about contribution, and a lot of it's just about common sense. So that's the
That's.
piece whereby, and although I do think sometimes common sense is completely wrongly named because it's
Oh yes, 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 absolutely. What is that saying? If everybody had common sense, or oh, I can't even think of the saying. It's something along the lines of if it was common, everybody would have it.
yeah, and that's it.
Yeah.
You so we do that a lot, but that whole education piece is really important. We do some interviews as part of our work within the business. We do some of the interview skill stuff at the university and all that kind of crack.
Hmm.
And you see the same things. It doesn't matter whether they're 16-year-old school leavers or whether they're 22-year-old graduates. Exactly the same things exist.
Hmm.
And oftentimes it can be traced back to insecurity and confidence rather than
Absolutely.
any technical knowledge of the process. So that's a completely separate thing. And that's probably where the employer can do an awful lot to ease that process for a
Yeah.
candidate as well.
Yeah. I think sometimes the employers forget that they have been through that process themselves. Some people might enjoy the process, but let me tell you, there's more that don't.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
more people out there that don't enjoy the process. And unfortunately, they get stuck in jobs that they can do very easily, but they're being wasted because
Mm,
they can do the next level up or the next level up after that. And they continue to sit in a job feeling a little bit underutilized
mm.
for a long period of time for fear of that interview.
I would know in my own life a bunch of kind of number two, number three people within organizations that should be chief executives, but
Hmm.
they get one person in particular gets violently ill. He just physically
Yeah.
gets nauseous and nervous around this sort of stuff, and that's fine. There is a process there. There is part of it, and if you'll forgive me for being very direct for a second, there is a part of it which is stick it up, buttercup. You got to go. You've
Hmm.
just whatever, be it. And I don't care how you do it, if it's hypnosis, if it's coaching, if it's working with someone like yourself, if it's rehearsing in front of the mirror every night for a month,
Mm.
whatever it is you got to do. But suck it up because
Yeah.
that's the process that exists. And, there's probably, and I sense in today's world, that's probably the direction it's going. I think we had many, many years of adaptions and process improvements and special allowances and circumstances. What I'm now seeing at the kind of corporate level, if you like, is a lot of that stuff being pulled away and
Yeah.
a simple attitude of if you can't do it, don't apply.
Yep.
That doesn't mean it's right, but I feel like that's the environment that the next generation of young people are going to come into. It's if you're nervous about the interview, that sounds like a you problem. And I think that's where we're going to, be it right or that's without statement as to whether it's right or wrong. I just think that's where we're going.
Yeah, I suppose it depends which side of the fence you're on
Yeah.
to make that decision of whether it's right or wrong. But you're right, there has been a massive shift with interviews.
Mm-hmm.
Some people, they they either really enjoy the interview or they don't.
Mm.
But the adoption that has been happening over the last 10, 15 years has really come into a very sharp end. And
Yeah.
I can see more and more and more businesses just deciding that, listen, this is the process, this is the game we play. Go and learn the rules, go and learn how to play the game, and then come back.
Yeah.
But again, on the flip side, we have so many people who can do the job, just can't do the interview.
And that's where the line is. That's the kind of dividing line between those that progress and those that don't. And sadly, a lot of the most capable people don't.
Mm-hmm.
There is part of this which is theater. It's undeniably the ability to sit in front of a room and know when to smack your hand on the table and know when to finish a sentence on a hard point and have a meaningful pause and thoughtful look out the window. It's all these things that people do and I see them when I've interviewed. I mean, I've probably interviewed hundreds and hundreds of people over the years.
Mm.
And, you can get some of them which are completely style over substance. And three out of the room will go, that's the best candidate we've seen all year. And the other two will go, he didn't say anything. Like he just that candidate did not answer a single question, but he performed it as if it was Hamlet. And
Their delivery was exceptional. Their content
exceptional.
was nothing.
Yeah, and that's the problem that you going, he was really impressive. And when you go to score the form, it's like, oh, I didn't actually write anything down. He spoke for 20 minutes and didn't make a point. So, I mean, it's that balance. And unfortunately, that also comes in whenever you get someone who can make a point and do it. I mean, I always joke with my wife because whenever she was going for promotions in the health service, we would have her well drilled on,
Mm-hmm.
star answers that were just examples of, and she had maybe three or four. And I said, no matter what the question is, just ratchet in one of these examples
Yeah.
because they'll have to give you the points whether they like it or not. And on that methodology and with a bit of delivery coaching, she could have been chief executive of the trust within about 5 years because nobody else did it. And that
Yeah.
was the challenge, was there were really capable people who should have been 3 or 4 bands higher than they were, but no one told them this is how you answer a competency-based question. This
Yep.
is how, so she would walk in with her examples, her case studies, her bits and pieces, and all the tricks. And I didn't even need to worry about it. I was just waiting on the phone call because I knew that out of the 5 or 6 candidates for a role in that sector, probably only one other person would in any way be properly prepared for an interview. And, again, it's a sectoral based thing, but you've got to, that's the game.
That's it. And that's what I teach people to do. And I know you'd mentioned about the hypnosis and the different way of communicating and coaching. Well, that is part of what I do.
Mm.
I am an NLP practitioner, which involves hypnosis to a point. Now, it's never done without consent, but some people actually need it. They need to go as far as that to get past this fear because it is a genuine fear for people.
It is, and it's real, and it's unfortunate. It's that thing, and even if it is, and again, this isn't a comment to the efficacy of the program because I know a lot of people have gone through the NLP stuff and been very successful with it. But even if it didn't quite work, but they have the placebo effect of feeling like they've done something like that, that also helps them get across a barrier.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's the whole piece of what is the thing that you need. When my daughter falls and scrapes her leg, I have the magic juice which we give her to make it heal, and it's water with like a tiny half teaspoonful of sugar in it, but that heals cut legs and bruised things. What is the thing that you need to get through the conversation? And be it coaching and thing. I don't mean that in a flippant way about that sort of training, because it is a fully effective methodology. But it's more the psychological piece of how can I sit in front of someone just like the grads and be comfortable in my own shoes
Yeah.
and feel like I belong. I deserve to be in that chair, and I'm not. I think people get flippant over the imposter syndrome thing, but how do I feel comfortable in my own shoes there? And
But you can see that and feel that when someone is comfortable
that's
in their
hard.
own shoes.
Yeah, yeah, but the other way is horrible. If
It is.
someone doesn't feel there, it's horrible for the panel. It's horrible for them. There's a tangible feeling in the room. Whereas
Hmm.
if someone has that bit of comfort, you're the and at the end of the day, an interview is a conversation. You
It
know,
is.
that's all at the beginning, the middle, and the end. It's a conversation. So if you're comfortable having a conversation, then you should be perfectly comfortable in an interview situation. But it's all the stuff around it that obviously changes people's emotions around that.
Yeah.
But we how do you get through that conversation? So, whatever the magic potion is that you need, that's your magic potion. And that's, it could be a shot of espresso. It could be a glass of water. It could be going to the gym beforehand to get rid of some of the nervous energy, whatever it is that people need. That's it. But the system ain't going to change. There's no better
No.
viable alternative. Um, and to be fair, the other part of it, and if I can be the capitalist for a second, the reality is that people who are coming into roles, especially more senior roles, are going to be put in awkward situations. They're going to be
Hmm.
put in situations where they're under pressure. They're going to have to communicate good and bad news with emotion attached to it. They got to be able to get through a 45-minute conversation where we're asking them if we can pay them money to do a job. You know,
Yeah.
they got to be
Yeah.
able to do that. So sometimes it's also an indicator that some of those people who are paralyzed going into those conversations might struggle with the soft skills required at the higher level. But again, that's a slightly that might be a more controversial opinion than
Is that maybe a training needs
yeah.
potentially? If you've seen potential in someone, but you know that they have a little bit of a blind spot or a little bit of a lacking in the soft skills, maybe that's a training need that needs to be addressed and identified pretty
That's
quick.
yeah, that's an interesting point. I mean, that is something that if you're looking at someone's personal development plans in the organization and you go, listen, you've gone for this interview twice, you should have got it, you didn't get it. Do we need to do something about your communication skills? Do we need to do something about your,
Declan,
whatever it is?
the very first thing that someone in that line of work will say is maybe you're not good enough to get it. And I
Yeah.
have heard that so many times. And candidates have actually came to me and said, Kevin, someone told me that I wasn't good enough to get it. And I thought, wow, that's like a very personal, like
Yeah.
you are not good enough. Not what you did in that interview wasn't good enough to achieve the criteria or meet the criteria, but you weren't good enough.
No, that's fairly savage. And again,
Indeed.
there's a piece of it around, and it's something that I've learned, I suppose, because I came through a fairly brutal world in sales where, it's not known for its nuance and, delicacy. Whenever you move more into that professional services world and consulting, and especially when you interact with the public sector, you kind of have to learn. It's a very, very steep learning curve about how to communicate with people, and what's appropriate and what's not appropriate, and even the smallest things. And it really is a reflection on how even the smallest things that you say from an interviewer's point of view or from any leadership point of view, the impact and sometimes the long-term impact it can have on someone in their career because of a throwaway comment that you probably hadn't even thought through, but it festers with someone for a long time.
Yeah.
You got to be super careful of that. So saying to someone, you're not good enough is savage. I mean, it's absolutely because they will, that's an infinite term. You're not good
It
enough
is.
is you will never be good enough.
Mm-hmm.
Even framing it as, listen, we couldn't get you the score this time around here's 2 or 3 things to look at least indicates that you can come back in a year and have another swing at it.
But Declan, one of the most difficult things at this moment in time, and more businesses are not doing this, is they are not giving feedback. So there is absolutely no way for people to understand if what went well, what didn't go
Yeah.
well, how can I improve? Maybe they want this exact job in this exact company because their values align, but they
Hmm.
can't get past the interview process, and they're given nothing as way of support. It's that old adage of you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
So if you don't know what you are doing right or wrong, how can you then go away and improve that, change that, adapt to that? And I know you go and you speak to someone, you go and have a conversation with someone maybe within the organization, you reach out to someone, and maybe that's another level, but there are not many people out there that would actually do that. They wouldn't reach out to someone on LinkedIn and say, listen, you're doing the job that I would like to do, but in a different company.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a couple of questions?
Yeah, and I think that's a big career builder. I mean, that would have been something, when I was about 21, 22, and you're kind of finishing your degree. I would have been a fan of opening, used to have the Sunday Life at the time, used to have the job section, and it used to have the jobs that you could look at. And God bless my mother, she would cut them out. This is job. Now, I'm an undergrad. I haven't even graduated yet, but she's cutting me out job ads for like marketing director at Tato. It's that sort of
Well,
thing,
do you know
right?
what? Maybe she's seen something in you that you didn't.
I
You know.
Or maybe she's a lunatic. Let's just meet somewhere in the middle, right?
Listen,
But
mothers are great. They mean well. Let's go. They mean well.
no, absolutely. But what it actually forced you to think about was it forced you to think, okay, if that's the destination. So, everything that she cut out for me was a destination job,
Yeah.
right? And only like the most helicopter of helicopter parents would not think this was the first step. But again, because marketing was new, no one knew what this job was. It
Yeah.
couldn't,
Yeah.
she still says to me now, I saw a job advertised in the bank. It would be really good. She just has that, we public service job, a wee, job in the bank. It's nice and
Safe.
reliable,
Yeah. Nice and
and,
safe.
and it's nice and safe. So you look at all that stuff, but you go, okay, but if I was to go for that job, what would I need to do before that job? What
Hmm.
would I need to do before that? What would it, and it kind of has you thinking, well, what do you need to do over the next 10 years to get there? And I have no problem at all with candidates at that graduate level, for example. I mean, one of the probably the most frequent position I've hired for has been kind of a profile of that graduate plus a year's experience in that kind of for professional services. And the ones that always stuck with me and the ones that I always liked were the ones that said, I want to be in this job in 10 years. What are your plans for the future? How
Yeah.
do you see your career developing? I love the people who actually had an answer for that question, which wasn't, I'd like to be here and settle down and do well and then maybe get a management role in this organization. Like, that's a lie. That's not what you're thinking. Or else you haven't thought about it. And I don't know which of those is worse. So if you're looking at that, but someone who turned around and said, well, actually, I'm interested in, I remember one young man saying, actually, I really wanted to work in aerospace, and I know that if I do this, it will lead on to something else, and then I can probably do some supply chain stuff. And I'm going,
Mm.
okay, you actually understand how this works, right?
Yeah. You understand the process and the steps.
You understand the process and the steps. They weren't perfect, but they were a damn sight better than I would have expected a 22-year-old to know about the industry,
Hmm.
with all due respect. And I was going, okay, I can work with you because you get it. You're here and you're only going to stay with us for 2 years. But I'm
Hmm.
pretty confident I'm going to get 2 good years out of you. And then you're going to move on to someone else and move on to someone else. And that's something that I take a lot of joy from personally is the young people who come through our organizations in the past, seeing where they are now and some of the roles
Yeah.
they're in now are absolutely incredible. So, and we would have taken them from working in the pavilion on the Ormo Road. They were
Hmm.
working in bars, they were working in cafes. They had completed their degree and then they'd gone and gotten a proper job. It wasn't the job that they wanted, but they were doing something that was earning money full time and
Yeah.
they had really good social skills. you take them in, you train them up, and where some of those people have gone to now is absolutely just phenomenal. So that's the piece that is really interesting. So it's those guys that can say, here's what the career looks like, here's what it could be, this is where I'd like to be in a few years. I think that's completely fair. And I think it's also, when a graduate comes in and say it, it's probably the first honest answer they've given you the entire interview.
But the good thing for me is, and when I'm listening to what you're saying, is that what it sounds like you're looking for is real, genuine, authentic people who say, listen, I don't know everything. I'm willing to learn a little bit. I'm willing to be guided. I'm willing to be supported. But you don't want anybody coming in and trying to pull the wool over your eyes and going, oh, yeah, yeah, I know how to do everything. I'm absolutely fantastic. Blind spots, I don't have any. It's
No.
like, oh dear, even when you had mentioned about, my biggest problem is that I'm a perfectionist, but it's also my best thing as well. I'm
Yeah.
thinking, oh my goodness, please. I have sat in that seat hundreds of times and heard that same thing, only to realize that actually perfectionism isn't a good thing at all.
No.
Regardless, it is not something we should be aiming for ever. It's
No.
progress. It's progress is what we should be aiming for ever.
Even if that wasn't the case, my issue with it is you couldn't think of a proper answer, so you've thrown that crap against the wall. Give me the dignity of just saying I'd rather not answer that question, because I would respect that more than
But
giving
and
me.
and this is what I'm saying, Declan. It's that authenticity that you're looking for.
Yeah,
It's
it
that
has to be,
conversation.
because it all comes down to the glass of wine. Like I can't, I know with that person that they're going to contribute to my team. We're going to argue. Like, I love really smart people who disagree. Like,
Mm,
really smart people who disagree with me, because I might not like it at the time, but either I have to prove my case properly and
hmm
work it out and make a firm decision, or else it'll be enough to give me the wobbles and realize it probably wasn't a good idea in the first place and we need to go back to the drawing board again. So I like really smart people who disagree. And even if it's, the graduate who's coming in who just through um loving ignorance says, that doesn't make any sense to me. And I go,
Yeah.
you're right, it doesn't make any sense. Why did I? Because in my head, I've complicated it and overcomplicated it and thought about 15 different scenarios. And it was like, no, there's a story about the raid where they captured Osama bin Laden, where it was, they were doing the planning for days and days and days. And they were going, is there anything we haven't thought of? And apparently it was the newest recruit, a young graduate, a young cadet graduate, whatever it is
hmm
for special forces people. Like, this was his first mission. Imagine getting that as your first mission. But one of his first missions, and he says, "Has anyone thought about what happens if the helicopter crashes in the front garden?" And everyone went, "Don't scud us! Don't even dream that that could happen." Sure as hell, that happened, and they had a plan for it. And it was the youngest pair of ears in the room that just said the obvious thing of, there's lots of power lines across the top there. What if the helicopter hits one of them?
Mm,
And that was it. And so it's that one where, when you're not thinking about the complicated stuff, you're not thinking about that. Sometimes the simplest thoughts are the best ones. So we like that. That comes back to that authenticity. We want them to have the character to say these things, to have opinions. And then if it turns out they're wrong because of technical or historical information which they don't have, which happens a lot as well,
yeah.
okay, fair enough, and carry on with their day. They don't, mope about it. They don't feel hard done by. They don't feel that they're being ignored. You just move on to what's next. So that's really important to me. And that's the part whereby, when you go from 2 people to 4 people to 6 people to 10 people, that's the bit that holds it together, and you
Yeah.
don't start getting fractures. That it's important to me anyway.
Yeah. Well, Declan, thank you very much for this. But we are going to ask this question that we're all dying to hear the answer to. Declan, tell us all about your worst interview ever and why it was your worst.
The reason I'm calling this my worst interview ever is because every time I'm in a conversation with someone about recruitment or interviews, it comes to my head. The same story, without fail, every single time. And it speaks to the attitude piece, and it speaks to the common sense stuff that we have spoken about already. And it was we were recruiting at the time for a quite a good job. It was for a kind of mid-level salesperson to do sales, international sales work, good travel involved, good terms, all the rest of it. And it was designed for kind of a graduate plus a year or two. But it was a lovely opportunity for someone if they were appointed. And we were running the interviews. And again, as you know, when you run interview panels, and a lot of people don't realize this, they're not the only person being interviewed that day, right? It's not just all set up for them. So we had been in a room from 9 o'clock in the morning until 5 o'clock in the evening. And this candidate was due to come in at 2 o'clock. And he called and said, listen, I'm really sorry. I'm in work. I can't get out. Is there any way that I can't go and and that happens from time to time. And I wouldn't want to jeopardize someone's current job by saying, no, come now or never. So we would say, well, listen, we'll be flexible. What we'll do is we will move it until after 5 o'clock. We'll stay after. We'll keep the place open. We will facilitate this. No problem. That's fine. Great. So actually didn't work out too bad. We ended up with a long lunch. That was a nice way to spend an afternoon. And we wait until, I think it was, let's say 5:30. 5:30, text message, not a phone call, not an email, a text message saying, hey, I'm sorry, I got held up. I'll be there in 10 minutes. No problem. Fine. We're here this long. Doesn't make a difference. And then 6 o'clock rolls around and he eventually turns up at about 6:05. So with all of this, we're waiting, and I've kept the senior team. So it's a senior team of people, not just me and my colleague, but also our client and another member of staff from their team. And we've got the panel, and he turns up and he says, after all of that, the first question, which is a question I can't stand in the interview process, which is, why do you want to come and work here? And after all of that, his response was, I don't know if I do. And at that point, if the floor had have opened up, I would have thrown him into it. I would have drop kicked him over the wall out of the building. I was going after this, and you heard simultaneously 3 pens go down. There was one person wrote notes and did all the official stuff, because obviously you've got to do this properly still. But there were 3 people that spent more time looking out the window because on one level, the rebellious side of me goes, fair play to you for being honest. The other part of me goes, do you not realize how much time, energy, money, resource we have put into this recruitment process? And even if you're not sure, to have the audacity to walk into a room with 4 people who have waited 4 hours on you in this part, and say you don't know if you even want the job. Even if you were the best candidate by 1,000,000 points on the form, I can't give you a job now because these 3 think you're a douchebag. And that's where I always remember, because it always makes me think of, one, be so sure that you want a job when you apply for it. Make sure that it's the thing that you want to do with your career. And sometimes people's economic situation means that they have to go for jobs that wouldn't be ideal. I completely respect and understand that. But if you are in a position where you're looking for a job, or you're in a job and you're changing, be sure that it's what you want to do, and do your background research. Secondly, even if you're not sure, at least pay the people the respect in the conversation of having an answer to the question that they ask you, because you can always decline it afterwards and come up with the reason. You got a pay rise, you got whatever, that's fine. But whenever you throw out an answer like that, I would always ask people to think, what do you expect our reaction to be? What do you expect reasonable people who at this time have sat through 7 other interviews so far that day? We have heard, especially at graduate interviews, we have heard about how everyone worked in group projects and were the most active person and someone else didn't. Blah, blah, blah. We have heard everyone's a perfectionist. We've heard all the nonsense all afternoon. We're getting tired, grumpy, hungry. We're humans. And then you rock in and don't at least play the game. that you're asking for trouble. And I would almost be certain that afterwards that candidate probably came out and went, yeah, I thought it was grand. They were fine. I don't know if I want the job, but
Right.
it was dead on. But that would be my worst interview because it was everything that you could go wrong in a process, they went wrong on. And
Mm.
it's a complete, I would always ask people, and I suppose for value for people who might be listening to this is just please, please, please understand that the people interviewing you want you to be successful. They want you to get the job. And quite often, one or two people in the room need you to get the job because
Mm.
their job depends on successfully filling these roles. So,
I,
there's a
I tell this to people all the time, Declan, that when you walk into that interview room, they are so hoping you are the right person, because
yeah,
the sooner they can find the right person, the sooner they can stop doing this part of their job
absolutely.
that is not the actual part of the job they're paid for.
No, and that's the thing is you're got, oh, right, okay, I've got to spend an entire day listening to nonsense.
Yeah. So they
Often
want the right
happening.
person.
Just you want the right person, you want them to be successful, and you have to treat those people sitting around that table with the respect that they have given you the opportunity. They want you to be successful, and they're not trying to trip you up. There's no trick questions.
No.
It's just very simple. And quite oftentimes, these are the same people you have to prompt 5, 6 times to try and get
Mm.
an answer out. And to be fair, within our business, we have a strict one prompt rule. So if I'm telling you, I give you a prompt and you still don't catch on, then that's natural selection. You were never supposed to be.
Mhm.
It's the ones where you go, I had to ask him 16 times for him to catch on what I was talking about. Probably you're finding that's going to move on to other parts of the job as well. So
Well,
that's
this is
that's
it,
the
isn't
word
it?
for me.
Well, no, you're absolutely right, though. It's the behavior that you see within the interview process itself is the behavior you're going to see outside of that.
Mm.
Potentially worse, because you're on usually your best behavior. I'm not
Mhm.
sure about that gentleman that came in to speak with yous, but you're usually on your best behavior. And that's probably the best you're going to see of them.
Yeah.
And if you're still having to prompt them 16 times, if you're still having to sit around with your mouth open going, you don't actually know why you want this job. I mean, I don't know what I would have done, Declan, had I sat in that room. I've had experiences over 25 plus years of interviewing, and some of them I completely just had to stop and get up and suspend the interview for a moment because I couldn't believe that it actually happened. But
Yeah.
I don't want to go into that because it's not about me today. It's about you today, and it's about our listeners today and what they're going to take away. But this interview has been absolutely amazing. It's been so it's been so fulfilling for me to hear just from a different angle that you're very similar to myself. You have these traits that you look for in people that you also look for in your business. You know,
Absolutely.
the rudeness, the very simple of common sense,
Hmm.
and cliches. You know, make the effort. You know, we have all made the effort as a panel. We're all, we might be getting paid for it. However, we are out of our normal job role, doing something else that where we could be doing our normal job. That
Absolutely.
costs money and time and energy that they are not paying for.
Absolutely.
Make the effort. Just turn up, make the effort. And as you quite rightly said, if the job isn't for you, at least still make the effort, go through the process, get a bit of a learning from it, go away. If you get offered the job, you can turn it down and say to get offered a job somewhere else. And thank you very much, because you never, ever close a door in business.
No.
Ever. You just never know where that person will end up
And even
in your other job.
even from our perspective as an employer, and if I'm sitting on a panel in my own business or else, but and kind of similar to yourself, I would be asked by clients and things to sit on panels for kind of senior roles, and you don't know when you're going to bump into these people again, and you don't know whenever the situation changes and maybe they want to come back again, and it's a different thing. So you just have to be so careful. And in today's world as well, you have to, it's very hard to come back whenever there's a piece of paper that says didn't show up,
Mm-hmm.
didn't feedback, because there's so much competition for roles
Yeah.
that, especially in the bigger companies. I mean, I've always worked, a lot of the organizations I've even worked within or with. are not household name brands. So they would be regional companies where you have to go, this is who we are, this is what we do.
Mm-hmm.
For those household name brands, there are 150 applicants at least for every job.
There
So
is.
forget about it.
Mm-hmm.
If you're giving someone a softball reason to stroke your name off the list and cut down the resource they have to spend on doing it, even better. So it's one of those ones where it's not, without being too blunt about it, the problem is they need and want people to be successful through the process because it's incredibly expensive and
Yes.
resource in doing it. So whenever I do think, just to finish on, because I know I'm blithering on a wee bit on you, but just to finish that thought, because it sounds like I'm being very pro business and anti-candidate, and I'm really not, because whenever people get their head around that thought, that everyone in the room needs and wants me to be successful in the process,
Mm-hmm.
that should be everything you need to relax and enjoy it.
That's it.
When you know you're in a room where you've got 4 cheerleaders in the room, or 5 cheerleaders, depending on
Mm-hmm.
what organization it is, they are actively wanting you to tick all the boxes. If you can get that head back to what you said at the start about how do you get that graduate to think like they've already got the job and speak assumptively,
Mm-hmm.
that's it. But you've got to get your head around that notion that these people aren't here to, again, trip you up. They're not here to try and trick you. They want you to need. So that's why it's so important. And when I go into universities and speak to kind of third year classes on their job options moving forward, it's that piece of, you have no idea how expensive it is to hire you.
Mm.
You
There has actually been some calculations done around this, and they're talking that the very basic minimum amount is close to £7,000, and some of it can go up to at least £30,000 depending on the level and the job role. And when you look at it and you look at all the hidden costs that there are involved in interviewing, very easily can creep up and creep up and creep up. And that's not investment. They're not investing that. They're just not getting that back. It's
no,
gone. Once it's done, it's gone.
that's that's
Declan, you and I could probably talk here forever on
yeah,
this.
that's
And I
fair.
think we might need a part two of this, because we could talk forever on this. But listen, I want to thank you very much for coming on today. But I want to also let our listeners know where they can find you. So Declan, where can our listeners find you if they want to reach out?
I'm not much of a social media person, but you'll find me on LinkedIn. You'll find the websites exportexplore.com. I'm always happy to talk to companies who are in any point of their growth. Whatever it is, if I can help find you a solution within 2 phone calls, I'll do it. So give me a shout and connect wherever, and we'll have a chat.
Okay, thank you very much, Declan. You'll also find Declan's information in our show notes, and we will post it onto our socials as well whenever we're putting out this episode. So thank you very much, Declan. Folks, please tune in again where we will have more people giving us a little peek behind the curtain of the interview and of the HR world. So until next time, see you all then.
For more details about our guest, or if you would like to be a guest, go to www.interviewskillscoach.co.uk/my-worst-interview-ever, or find us on Facebook or LinkedIn. And remember, on the other side of a successful interview is the life you deserve.